She walked through life with wealth as her shield, untouchable, unchallenged, and feared by many. Everyone who crossed her path eventually gave up, defeated not just by her arrogance, but by the invisible power her family's money carried. Teachers, mentors, even friends one by one, they all failed. But then came the man no one expected, a quiet janitor, overlooked by the world, who dared to stand where others had fallen. What happened next wasn't just about her. It revealed an ugly truth about power, prejudice, and the weight of being seen as less. For the daughter of a millionaire, life had always been effortless. She was raised in mansions with gates taller than most buildings, chauffeured to elite schools where rules bent the moment she stepped in. To everyone else, she was untouchable, not just because of her father's money, but because of the unspoken fear that came with confronting her. Teachers kept their distance, never daring to challenge her arrogance. Classmates whispered about her, but no one stood up when she mocked or dismissed them. Even the staff in her own home tiptoed around her presence, careful not to offend. And beneath it all was something far more poisonous than entitlement, an attitude sharpened by privilege and prejudice, one that quietly punished those who didn't look like her, speak like her, or come from her world. The daughter knew this power, and she wielded it without hesitation. Her words could ruin reputations. Her silence could erase someone completely. And because of who she was, people let it happen. Everyone had tried. Teachers, mentors, even so-called friends all walked away, defeated. She was the storm no one could calm, the fire no one dared put out. But then, one day, she crossed paths with someone entirely unexpected, a janitor, a man invisible in her world, overlooked and underestimated. He didn't wear expensive suits, didn't speak with authority, and had no wealth to shield him. Yet something about him would soon challenge everything she thought she knew. The question was, how could someone society ignored become the one person she couldn't break? At first, the janitor was nothing more than background noise in the girls' world. He swept floors, emptied trash cans, and kept to himself, invisible. That's how people like him were expected to remain. Present but unseen. Asterisk but one afternoon. Everything shifted. She had been mocking a younger student, her words sharp, dipped in venom. The classroom went silent, yet no one dared intervene. That's when the janitor entered, pushing his cart across the floor. He paused not because he intended to get involved, but because he couldn't ignore what he was witnessing. Her voice, cold and cruel, cut through the air. Asterisk, people like you don't belong here. The younger student's eyes fell to the floor, shoulders heavy with shame. It wasn't just a childish insult. It was the kind of racism polished by privilege, sharpened by years of going unchallenged. And for the first time, someone refused to look away. The janitor's gaze locked with hers. He didn't speak, not yet. But in that silence, she felt something she wasn't used to. Resistance. She smirked, brushing it off. After all, who was he? Just a janitor, a man who mopped up after everyone else. But the next day, when she tossed a cruel remark at another student, he was there again, watching, waiting. His silence wasn't weakness. It was a mirror, reflecting her ugliness back at her days past, and the tension grew heavier. Every insult she hurled, every sneer she delivered, somehow bounced back when he was around. He never shouted, never scolded. Instead, he treated the very students she tore down with a quiet respect she couldn't comprehend. It infuriated her. She lashed out, testing his patience. Once, she even knocked over his cleaning supplies, daring him to react. Everyone held their breath, expecting anger or retaliation. But he simply knelt down, gathered his things, and went back to work calm, steady, unbroken. And that was the problem. She couldn't break him. The whispers started spreading. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. For the first time, her cruelty wasn't the only story being told. There was this janitor, a man who stood taller without ever raising his voice, who challenged her without saying a word, and that silence was louder than anything she'd ever heard. But the more he stood his ground, the more desperate she became. She wasn't just fighting a janitor, she was fighting the possibility that her power, built on money and prejudice, could be undone by someone the world had dismissed as less. Something had to give. And when it did, the moment would test, both of them in ways no one expected, because soon she would go too far. And when she did, the janitor would be forced to make a choice, one that could change everything. It happened on a Friday afternoon. The hallways buzzed with chatter, lockers slamming shut, the end of the week hanging in the air. But then her voice cut through it all. She stood at the center of the hallway, a smirk on her face. Her friends gathered behind her like shadows, and in her hand a carton of dirty water from the mop bucket. The janitor was only a few steps away, bent over his cart. Her words were sharp, cruel, each syllable laced with venom. Asterisk, this is where you belong. On the floor, cleaning up after people who actually matter. Asterisk, and before anyone could stop her, she hurled the water. Gasps filled the corridor. Students froze, teachers turned, and in that suspended moment, time seemed to split. The liquid splattered across his uniform, dripping down his shoulders, soaking the floor he had just cleaned. Every eye was on him. Everyone waited. For anger. For rage. For the explosion they thought must come. But he didn't move. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, his jaw tight, but his eyes stayed steady. He stood tall in the wreckage of her cruelty, refusing to bow to the humiliation. The silence was suffocating. And then something remarkable happened. One of the younger students she had tormented before stepped forward, then another, then another. They stood beside the janitor, forming a quiet line of defiance. The hallway was no longer hers, was his. Her smirk faltered. For the first time, she looked small, powerless, because in that moment, the truth was undeniable. The man she tried to break had become unshakable, and the students she once ruled through fear were no longer afraid. But what came next would leave the entire school stunned. The silence in that hallway didn't last. Teachers rushed in, the principal arrived, and whispers rippled like waves. The millionaire's daughter stood frozen, her cruelty exposed in front of everyone she once controlled, and the janitor soaking wet, humiliated in the eyes of some, stood taller than he ever had before. The principal's voice cut through the tension. Asterisk, enough. For once, the spotlight turned where it belonged. She was suspended, her family's influence powerless against the undeniable truth witnessed by dozens of students. But the punishment wasn't the real victory. The real impact was something deeper. From that day forward, the janitor wasn't just a face in the background. Students began greeting him, helping him, seeing him. The halls he once walked in silence now echoed with small acts of respect. And, for the daughter, her fall from power revealed something she had never faced before: accountability. The walls of privilege couldn't shield her forever. It's about something bigger, something that stretches far beyond those hallways. Because what happened that day is a reflection of what happens in countless places every single day. People dismissed, people dehumanized, people told through actions or words that they don't belong. And just like that janitor, they're forced to decide, break under the weight or rise above it. The question is, how many more people must endure humiliation before society truly learns? How many times must dignity be stripped away before respect becomes the rule, not the exception? Because in the end, racism isn't just about slurs or actions or privilege. It's about the silence of those who watch and choose to do nothing. So ask yourself, when the moment comes, will you stand by quietly, or will you be the one to step forward?